The air is crisp, the morning serene. It's September 11, 2001, a regular Tuesday in New York City. Workers shuffle into offices, coffee cups in hand, the hum of a busy city echoing in the background. But then, out of nowhere, a distant roar grows louder. A plane slices through the clear blue sky, descending too fast, too low. In seconds, chaos erupts, a deafening explosion, a fireball engulfing the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Screams pierce the air. Glass rains down. People stare in disbelief. Some film the scene with shaky hands, thinking it's a tragic accident. Then, the unthinkable. Another plane, another explosion. It's no accident. The world freezes, watching the Twin Towers burn. Black smoke snakes into the sky, choking Manhattan's skyline. Questions swirl, panic spreads. And then, the realization sets in. This is an attack. Deliberate, coordinated, the work of a mastermind. But who and why? In those moments, as the towers crumble, so does the sense of security for millions. What follows will unravel a story of hatred, power, and a man who reshaped global history in the most terrifying way imaginable. Far from the chaos of that fateful day, our story shifts to the sands of Saudi Arabia in the 1970s. A young boy named Osama bin Laden grows up in the lap of luxury. Born to a billionaire construction magnate, he is one of over 50 siblings in a sprawling, influential family. But Osama is different. Quiet, deeply religious, and fiercely opinionated. He finds solace not in wealth, but in the words of fiery sermons and ancient texts. Teachers notice his intensity, his unshakable focus. His family sees him as reserved, disciplined, an outsider among his own. As he matures, his surroundings begin to shape him. The streets of Jeddah echo with whispers of Islamic revival. The sermons in local mosques grow more political, more charged. Osama listens, absorbing every word. He becomes enthralled by the idea of jihad, not as a spiritual struggle, but as a physical battle, a duty. In the 1980s, an opportunity arises that will change everything. The Soviet Union invades Afghanistan, sparking outrage across the Muslim world. Osama, barely in his 20s, sees his calling. Leaving behind his privileged life, he sets off for the rugged mountains of Afghanistan. Here, among the Mujahideen fighters, he begins to transform. No longer just a wealthy Saudi, he becomes a figure of influence, a financier, a recruiter, and a leader. But even as he fights alongside others, his vision begins to diverge. He sees jihad not just as a fight against invaders, but as a global mission to reshape the balance of power. And so, the seeds of something darker are planted, something far more dangerous. The boy from Jeddah is no more. In his place, a man with a mission that will one day bring the world to its knees. The winds of change swept through the rugged terrain of Afghanistan, where Osama bin Laden's transformation was complete. No longer just a participant, he was now a leader, a strategist, and a man driven by a singular obsession: to wage war against the powers he believed oppressed the Muslim world. The Soviet forces eventually retreated, their war in Afghanistan a failure. But for bin Laden, this was not the end, it was the beginning. The victory emboldened him. If the mighty Soviet Union could fall, what of the other superpower? What of the United States? In the early 1990s, Osama returned to Saudi Arabia, expecting to be celebrated as a hero. Instead, he found disappointment. His home country, under pressure from the West, dismissed him, silencing his calls for continued jihad. Feeling betrayed, he turned against the Saudi regime, angered by their alignment with the United States. Banished from his homeland, bin Laden found refuge in Sudan, where his plans grew more ambitious. With millions at his disposal and a network of loyal followers, he began building something unprecedented. In secret meetings, over encrypted communications, and through shadowy channels, he laid the groundwork for a global organization. Al-Qaeda was born, But this was no ordinary group. It was disciplined, hierarchical, and fiercely ideological. Bin Laden's speeches and writings drew recruits from across the Middle East, Africa, and beyond. They came for training in remote camps, learning not just to fight but to think like operatives in a global war. And at the heart of it all was Bin Laden's grand vision, a worldwide jihad against the United States and its allies. He believed they were the root of all oppression in the Muslim world, and he was determined to bring them to their knees. What began as whispers of defiance turned into a roar of coordinated attacks. The bombings of U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, the USS Cole in Yemen, these were just a prelude. Each strike was a signal, a warning. But the world underestimated him. What they didn't see was that behind the calm, soft-spoken exterior of Osama bin Laden was a mind obsessed with precision, timing, and symbolism. He wasn't done, not by a long shot. In his mind, the ultimate strike was still to come. The question wasn't if he would act, it was when, and how devastating it would be. In the shadows of the late 1990s, a plan began to take shape. It was unlike anything the world had seen. A plot so audacious, so meticulously calculated, that it would shock nations and redefine global security forever. Osama bin Laden and his trusted lieutenant, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, met in secret. Their conversations, whispered in the dark corners of Afghanistan's caves, centered on a chilling idea: to strike at the heart of America. Not just any attack, but one that would be devastating, symbolic, and impossible to ignore. They called it the Plains Operation. Bin Laden's vision was clear. Strike their economy, their military, and their government, he declared. Planes, ordinary commercial aircraft, would be turned into missiles, weapons of mass destruction. It was a strategy designed to exploit trust, a mundane flight transformed into an instrument of terror. Recruitment began. Al-Qaeda operatives scouted for men who were intelligent, disciplined, and, most importantly, willing to die. They found them in Hamburg, Germany, young men with unassuming lives, capable of blending into Western society. Among them was Muhammad Atta, who would go on to lead the operation. The training was intense. In remote camps, recruits practiced hijacking scenarios. They studied aviation manuals, rehearsed knife combat, and memorized scripts to calm passengers. Meanwhile, in the United States, operatives enrolled in flight schools, learning to fly commercial jets but intentionally avoiding lessons on landing. Suspense thickens as the pieces fell into place. Al-Qaeda funneled money through covert channels, using untraceable transactions to purchase tickets and secure logistics. Communication was deliberately fragmented. Coded emails, cryptic messages, nothing that could easily be intercepted. By the summer of 2001, everything was ready. 4 teams of hijackers for planes and a single day chosen for maximum impact. September 11th. The date wasn't random. For bin Laden, it held symbolic weight, representing a call to arms for his followers and a message to his enemies. He believed this would not just cripple America, but inspire a wave of attacks across the globe. In the final days leading up to the attack, tension within the ranks was palpable. Some operatives grew nervous. Others prayed for strength. Bin Laden, however, remained calm. When informed the teams were in position, he reportedly smiled and said, "The match has begun." Little did the world know. In those moments, the clock was ticking down to an event that would forever mark a new era of fear and devastation. The plan was in motion, unstoppable, and its repercussions would echo across history. The morning of September 11th, 2001, began like any other. Commuters filled the streets, coffee shops buzzed, and the city moved at its usual frenetic pace. But high above, cruising through the skies, for planes were no longer under the control of their pilots. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 slammed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. A fireball erupted, black smoke billowing into the crystal-clear sky. News channels scrambled to cover what appeared to be a tragic accident. Viewers around the world watched in shock and confusion. Then at 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 tore into the South Tower. The fiery explosion shattered any illusions of coincidence. America was under attack. Panic gripped the streets of Manhattan as first responders rushed toward the unfolding disaster. Inside the towers, chaos reigned. Trapped workers clung to any hope of escape. Phone calls from the towers revealed the desperation and courage of those moments. But the terror didn't stop there. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon, the symbol of America's military strength. Flames engulfed the structure, and smoke rose over Washington, D.C., as the nation's leaders scrambled for safety. Meanwhile, on United Airlines Flight 93, the fourth and final plane, a group of brave passengers fought back. They had learned of the earlier attacks and realized their plane was part of the plan. Amidst cries of "Let's roll," they stormed the cockpit, forcing the hijackers to crash the plane into a field in Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m. Their sacrifice likely saved countless lives, as the intended target, believed to be the White House or the Capitol, was spared. Back in New York, the unthinkable happened. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapsed in a thunderous roar, sending a massive cloud of debris rolling through the streets. 30 minutes later, the North Tower followed. The city's iconic skyline was gone, replaced by dust, smoke, and heartbreak. As the towers crumbled, so too did the world's sense of security. Nearly 3,000 lives were lost that day, each one a story of unimaginable tragedy. But the question remained: who was behind this horror? While emergency crews dug through the rubble, intelligence agencies were piecing together the evidence. Names like Muhammad Atta and Al-Qaeda began to surface, and one name loomed above all others: Osama bin Laden. The mastermind had succeeded in his goal, to strike fear into the heart of America. But as the world mourned, a new resolve emerged. The hunt for bin Laden had begun, and it would not stop until justice was served. The world stood in stunned silence as the dust settled over Manhattan. Images of smoldering ruins, grieving families, and desperate searches for survivors filled every screen. But behind the scenes, in war rooms and intelligence agencies across the globe, a new chapter was beginning, a relentless hunt for the mastermind of the attacks. In Washington, President George W. Bush addressed the nation. "We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them." It was a clear message. Vengeance would be swift, and it would be global. Within days, all eyes turned to Afghanistan. Intelligence reports pointed to Al-Qaeda and its leader, Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden, long known to the CIA, had eluded capture for years. Now, he was the most wanted man in the world. The United States demanded the Taliban government, which controlled Afghanistan, hand over bin Laden. Their refusal was met with swift retaliation. By October 7, 2001, U.S. and coalition forces launched Operation Enduring Freedom, raining fire on Taliban strongholds and Al-Qaeda training camps. But bin Laden wasn't in the cities. He was deep in the mountains, in a labyrinthine network of caves known as Tora Bora. It was here, amidst the rugged terrain, that bin Laden's elusiveness became legendary. U.S. Special Forces and local Afghan allies closed in, bombing the caves relentlessly. Satellite imagery and intercepted communications confirmed his presence. Yet, despite the onslaught, bin Laden slipped through their grasp, vanishing into the shadows like a phantom. How? Theories abound: bribed locals, knowledge of hidden routes, sheer luck. But one thing was certain: bin Laden's escape marked a bitter failure for the United States. The war was far from over. As the months turned into years, bin Laden's taunts echoed across the airwaves. Through grainy video messages, he praised the attacks and called for more bloodshed. Each message was a chilling reminder of his continued influence and a symbol of frustration for the global forces hunting him. The war on terror expanded. Iraq, Pakistan, Yemen. Anywhere Al-Qaeda operatives were suspected to be, the U.S. followed. Billions were spent and thousands of lives were lost. Yet bin Laden remained elusive, his legend growing with each passing year. The world began to wonder, could the man responsible for the deadliest terror attack in history ever truly be caught? Or would he haunt the globe indefinitely, a shadowy figure of terror whose very existence defied justice? The hunt grew colder, but it never stopped. And somewhere in a quiet compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, bin Laden watched, waiting, as the clock on his freedom slowly began to tick down. Years passed, but the hunt for Osama bin Laden never wavered. Behind closed doors, intelligence agencies worked tirelessly, combing through satellite images, tracking financial networks, and interrogating captured Al Qaeda operatives. The trail was faint, but in 2010, a critical breakthrough came, a whisper of a lead that reignited the search. A trusted courier. For years, bin Laden had relied on a select few to communicate with the outside world. Among them was a man known only by his alias, Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti. U.S. intelligence had long suspected his involvement, but it wasn't until they tracked his movements to an unusual compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, that the puzzle pieces began to fall into place. The compound was unlike any other in the area. Surrounded by high walls topped with barbed wire, it had no internet or phone connections. Burned trash indicated a deliberate effort to avoid leaving a trace. But most telling of all, despite its modest exterior, there was a third-floor balcony where a tall, bearded man was occasionally seen pacing. Could it be him? Months of surveillance followed. Satellites watched from above, and agents observed from nearby safe houses. Every detail was scrutinized. There was no definitive proof, but all signs pointed to one conclusion. The man on the balcony was Osama bin Laden. The decision to act came swiftly, but not without risk. A raid deep inside Pakistan, without the government's knowledge, could spark international outrage. Yet the stakes were too high to wait. The mission was greenlit, and the world's most elite soldiers were called upon. On May 1st, 2011, under the cover of darkness, two Black Hawk helicopters carrying Navy SEAL Team 6 lifted off from a U.S. base in Afghanistan. Their target, the Abbottabad compound. As the helicopters approached, tension filled the air. The first Black Hawk attempted to hover above the compound wall, but crashed during the maneuver. Undeterred, the team pressed forward. They breached the walls, storming through the building with precision and speed. Gunfire erupted. Shouts echoed through the halls, and chaos reigned. One by one, the SEALs neutralized the compound's inhabitants, sparing the women and children. Then, on the third floor, in a dimly lit room, they found him. Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind 9/11, stood before them. He was shot and killed instantly. The operation was over in less than 40 minutes. As the SEALs departed, carrying bin Laden's body, the world was still unaware of what had just occurred. But when President Barack Obama addressed the nation later that evening, his words would send shockwaves across the globe. Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden. Cheers erupted in Times Square. Tears flowed at Ground Zero, and across the world, people reflected on the end of a decade-long manhunt. But for many, the moment was bittersweet. Bin Laden was gone, but the scars of his actions would remain forever. The mastermind had been defeated, but his legacy of terror left an indelible mark on history. The death of Osama bin Laden marked the end of an era, but it was far from the end of his impact. As news of the raid spread, reactions poured in from across the globe. In America, relief mixed with bittersweet memories of the nearly 3,000 lives lost on September 11th. Families of victims found closure, but the shadow of their loss lingered. For others, bin Laden's death was a turning point, a symbolic victory in the war on terror. Yet questions remained. Would this strike dismantle Al Qaeda, or would his death inspire new waves of extremism? Intelligence gathered from the Abbottabad compound painted a chilling picture. Even in hiding, bin Laden had remained active, directing operations and planning future attacks. The raid revealed a trove of documents, computers, and personal journals. Among them, chilling plans for more violence, including plots against railways and public events. His writings expose a man who, even in isolation, had not relinquished his grip on al-Qaeda's vision of global jihad. But as the dust settled, it became clear that al-Qaeda was already fracturing. Without its figurehead, the organization struggled to maintain cohesion. Splinter groups emerged, some more radical than the original. The seeds bin Laden had planted grew into new threats like ISIS, which would dominate the global stage in the years to come. For the United States and its allies, the victory was significant but sobering. Trillions of dollars had been spent on wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Thousands of lives had been lost. And while the man who orchestrated 9/11 was gone, the fight against extremism was far from over. Back in Abbottabad, the compound where bin Laden had lived for years was demolished by Pakistani authorities, leaving behind only whispers of his secretive existence. Locals recounted stories of the mysterious family who rarely ventured outside, unaware of the world's most wanted man living in their midst. Today, Osama bin Laden remains a symbol of hatred for some, of defiance for others, and of the devastating cost of extremism. His death closed one chapter, but the scars he left on the world endure. His actions reshaped geopolitics, redefined security, and reminded the world of the terrifying power of ideology. As the world continues to grapple with the consequences of 9/11, one question lingers. Was the death of bin Laden the end of an era, or simply a prologue to new challenges in the ever-evolving battle against terror? The story of Osama bin Laden is not just a tale of a man, but of a world forever changed by his actions. And as the years pass, his legacy remains, a haunting reminder of the dark depths of humanity and the enduring strength of those who rise to confront it. The story of Osama bin Laden ended in a compound in Abbottabad, but its repercussions rippled through the fabric of global history. His life, and the havoc he orchestrated, serve as a cautionary tale, a chilling reminder of how ideology, wealth, and ambition can converge to create a force capable of shaking the world. For the families of the nearly 3,000 victims of September 11th, justice brought some measure of closure, but the scars remain. The memorials at Ground Zero, the Pentagon, and Shanksville stand as solemn testaments to their loss, a reminder of the price paid for the failure to foresee and stop such a monumental act of terror. On the global stage, the war on terror reshaped nations. Afghanistan, the cradle of al-Qaeda's rise, remains a battleground, its people enduring decades of violence and instability. In the Middle East, the war's ripple effects created new power struggles and birthed even more dangerous extremist factions. But the world also learned valuable lessons. The necessity of global intelligence sharing became clear. Countries fortified their security systems, implemented rigorous airport protocols, and invested in counterterrorism efforts. The attacks forced nations to confront the root causes of extremism, though the solutions remain elusive. As we reflect on bin Laden's life, one thing becomes evident. His legacy is one of division, destruction, and fear. Yet, it also inspired resilience, unity, and a collective determination to confront terror. The bravery of those who risked their lives to save others on September 11th, the sacrifices of soldiers, and the courage of everyday citizens in the face of terror have become enduring symbols of hope. In the end, Osama bin Laden's vision failed. While he sought to divide and weaken, the world rallied. His death, though symbolic, marked a turning point, a moment when the tides began to turn against his ideology. The story of Osama bin Laden is not just a chapter in history. It is a warning. It reminds us of the devastating consequences of hatred and the enduring strength of human resilience. As the world continues to evolve, the lessons of 9/11 remain crucial: vigilance, unity, and the relentless pursuit of peace. And so, the name Osama bin Laden fades into history, a symbol of terror, but also a reminder that even in the darkest times, humanity's spirit can prevail. His story ends here, but the story of the world's fight against terror and for peace continues. The question is, will we remember the lessons of the past or allow history to repeat itself? The answer lies in the choices we make today.